Hello and welcome to Rings Check. I'm Barry and you are joining me for the second scenario in the Lord of the Rings saga for the card game, the living card game from Fantasy Flight, where I go over the story as it is told through the cards and hopefully help you immerse yourself in exactly where we are in the book, and hopefully allow you to enjoy the scenario a little more, and hopefully, you know, things go according to the story. You can understand exactly what's going on with each. So this second scenario, the Old Forest, is a small print-on-demand scenario, and it only really covers one chapter of the book, so there's a bit less going on than in the first one, A Shadow of the Past. So starting where we left, the four companions, that's Frodo, Sam, Merry and Pippin, have reached Buckland after avoiding the Black Riders on the way. And it is during this chapter that Frodo reveals his real plan to his friends, that he's going to leave the Shire completely, leaving Fatty Bolger to keep up the appearance that he remains. But Sam started off on the journey knowing what was going on, but it turns out that both Merry and Pippin also know of Frodo's plans. It turns out Frodo has not been as careful or clever as he thought. So these, the hobbits also know of the ring, although not exactly what it is, but they've known about this since Bilbo had it, not Frodo's fault in this time. And it seems as though that when Sam was caught by Gandalf, it was not the first time that he had been dropping some eaves. So after a good night's feasting on mushrooms, as given by Mrs. Maggot, Frodo resolves to leave the next day to avoid the riders coming into Buckland and potentially causing them problems. They don't want to wait another day for Gandalf, so if you played the first scenario, you may well have Gandalf's delay as your burden, and they've still not met up with Gandalf at this point. They need a way to avoid being tracked by the Black Riders, and Merry suggests travelling through the Old Forest, despite Fatty Bolger's protests. So all we know about the Dark Forest at this point is that in Chapter 1, Daddy Twofoot calls the Old Forest a dark, bad place, if half the tales be true. So we already know that going through the Old Forest is not something to be done lightly. So the hobbits leave very early the next day, under the cover of fog, and Merry tries to put Pippin's mind at ease that the old bogey stories about the forest are untrue. So that's just like ghost stories and scary stories told about the forest. The only thing to be worried about are the trees, which Merry says are, you know, the most unfriendly ones. May drop a branch or stick a root out, or grasp at you with a long trailer. Put those there. So as they enter the forest, they quickly become disoriented, and the trees themselves seem oppressive. Merry notes that the branches swayed and groped without any wind. So as they're entering deeper, here's all the sort of locations that represent the Old Forest. Now these aren't particularly mentioned in the story, but they all kind of come together to give you those locations, to give you the feeling of being in a forest. So as the group travel through the forest, Frodo begins to sing a song of encouragement as they feel this darkness around them. But the song had the line, "For east or west all woods must fail," and at that line the ill will of the forest grew stronger, causing him to stop. Frodo realises that he's shouldn't have sung that. The trees don't like it when you talk about them failing. And as they go deeper into the forest, we move on to the next sort of quest cards, and these all come fairly close together and kind of interchangeable. And you'll see within this quest they're all the second stage, and these rotate through just as you're going into the forest. You see more and more of it and how the forest moves, and this is a stage 2 card as well. How the group travel through the forest. So as they go deeper into it, the branches become thicker, forcing them ahead until they come to a clearing, as though the trees have shifted around them. After reaching the clearing, they spy a hill. They go up the hill, and they spot the Withy Window, which is a small river that feeds into the Brandywine, and it's described by Merry as being the queerest part of the whole wood. After being at the top of the hill, the hobbits hope to move on, avoiding the Barrow Downs, and that is the next scenario. But they're basically at the mercy of the path the forest chooses to take them, and the forest takes them down to the Withy Window. But once there, they know they just have to travel east in order to leave the woods. So the path would open up for them, but close them down again, forcing them down this path. The road was choked with brambles. So this whole second stage of the quest, just basically forcing you to go through all these locations, travelling through the forest, and you are very much at the mercy of the forest when doing so. So as they get along the river, the sun burning on their backs, and there was an army of flies buzzing around their heads. So that's one of the few enemies in this scenario. And the further down they go, the river, suddenly they become very sleepy, and decide to camp out under the willow trees, which was a bit cooler, avoiding the sun, and had much or fewer flies to disturb them. So all the hobbits lay down, all of a sudden very sleepy. They try to fight it a little bit, but they all need a nap, and don't blame them. And they all go to sleep under this big willow tree. The hobbits all awake when Frodo was thrown into the river, and there was the crack in the tree that Merry had fallen asleep in closed around him. So it was the tree itself that had thrown Frodo into the river, although nobody saw it. So, how alive the trees are, hard to say. So this grasping root had pulled him in, and you can see in the art here that the Frodo and Sam are trying to get Merry out of the tree. So the hobbits fought against the tree with fire and looking for a small axe, but Merry shouted that the tree would squeeze them in two if they didn't stop. And so this is Old Man Willow here, who's the big enemy of the scenario. It will go up in the staging area, and you'll be forced to fight it every turn. But once the fire's not working and they can't get Merry out, Frodo, for no good reason really, begins to run along a path crying for help. So they go but Frodo, without any clear idea of why he did so or what he hoped for, ran along the path crying help, help, help. Suddenly he hears somebody singing a nonsense song. So here we have Tom Bomb Jolly Tom Bombadillo, who offers to help, and this strange fellow comes to their aid and begins singing into the tree, so singing into Old Man Willow, and eventually the tree lets Merry go. After this, Tom invites the hobbits to his house, and that's where we start the next scenario, and all the hobbits choose to follow. So the big things from the chapter, of course, is that the hobbits have to go through the old forest. They fall asleep under Old Man Willow, who attacks them, not in the most mean of ways, like he doesn't try to kill them outright, but shows his displeasure that the hobbits are in his domain. And that is that. We pick up the next scenario in Tom Bombadil's house, and kind of move on from there into the Barrow Downs. But let's just have a look at some of the cards in this deck. Now, my deck hasn't changed a huge amount since the first scenario. All these cards are in the first scenario and they remain. They're either equally or equally thematic or as unthematic as they were before coming in, with the exception of Gaffer Gamgee, who becomes increasingly unthematic the further into the scenario you get, or further into the whole saga that you get. But he's very key to this scenario because Old Man Willow is going to attack you from the staging area every turn. So having some sort of attack cancel is key, because you don't have enough allies to chump block Old Man Willow every turn and still quest successfully. So being able to prevent his attacks with both Feint and Gaffer Gamgee are kind of key to this scenario if you want to survive. If you don't want to use Gaffer Gamgee, there are some chumps in here, so the cautious halfling from before, your curious brandybuck. If you don't travel to a location, you can use them to chump block. But in this one as well, we have the halfling bounder. So the bounders are the sheriffs to some degree on the outskirts of the Shire. They police the borders of the Shire and ensure that outsiders behave themselves. So outsiders in this case perhaps being the Black Riders. So you can assume that these guys are around, although they wouldn't be directly intervening in what the hobbits were doing. These guys have an ability, discard halfling bounder to cancel the when revealed effects, but you need a side quest in the display, and so here's a couple of side quests. You may actually want some more, but both of these are not any more thematic, or not particularly thematic for the stage of the scenario, but they're not limited to what the art depicts, or what the flavor text says. So here, gather information is about when they're tracking the hobbits after they've been captured, but can equally apply to any situation where you stop and think about things. You know, Merry talking about the old bogey stories, so they kind of know a little bit more about what to expect within the old forest. And scouting ahead here, again, they've not met Strider yet, but they can. You would expect, you know, the hobbits to be going in a file, somebody scouting ahead, just to see what's coming up next, and particularly as the paths in there change. Now, the reason you'd want a side quest is because all of these stage 2s don't have any progress, right? They don't require any progress. You basically need to clear locations before you can progress from any of them. So if you are questing successfully, you've no place to put all that progress, and it might as well go on these. And so you've got a little combo with the halfling bounder who can cancel when the falling branches, because that could be a potential game ender. If you have to remove a hobbit and deal it 2 damage, of course all your heroes are generally only 2 hit points, right? They're not very tough, so this can help you with that. And another thing that's going to help you either with taking a hit from Old Man Willow or for these kind of when revealed effects is the close call. Now again, the art there is when the cave troll attacks Frodo in Moria, but again, you're not limited to just what the art depicts and what the flavor text shows. A close call could be anything, right? So getting thrown into the river, but landing with a splash instead of smashing your heads on the rocks. You know, that's a close call. Dodging a falling branch, that's a close call. So there are very few cards that specifically fit into this scenario, I would say. I talked about Friend of Friends in the last scenario, but I've replaced. I've put that in. There's 3 copies. Again, whilst the art is the final book, Return of the King, and as they're going up Mount Doom, it's still relevant here because all the hobbits are friends and all the hobbits are working together already. So I'll go over the deck more when I play through the scenario next time, but hopefully hopefully you now know what's going on with the story. Hopefully you now know where this fits into the tale as a whole, and next time, after completing this scenario, we'll pick up in the house of Tom Bombadil before we travel through the Barrow Downs. So, quick one today, and that's that. Until next time, this is Rings Check signing off.